Conor McGinn is in the building. He will be in very shortly indeed. But first of all, 7 talking points this week. We will start with Goodwood, who are hoping, Cornelius, to be the first racecourse maybe to trial up to 5,000 people as a crowd. Now, that would be a very significant moment were that to happen.
Yeah, and in a way it seems like a sort of perfect place because you've got a big place in a part of the country, that whether not an urban part of the country or anything like that, and a big and loyal, it's quite easy to find that number of people to come. I don't know exactly how many members Goodwood would have, but it has many hundreds, probably thousands of members. So that's sort of easy to work out who you're going to invite and how you're going to bring them there. So I gather that I think there could be further announcements in the next few days about this, from what I gather. There's a bit of a race on between horse racing and county cricket to try and get crowds in. Obviously, wags will laugh. Surely county cricket's been social distancing for years. So there's a bit of a thing on. There are big names in government big brains in government who are scratching their head and trying to work out, could you open a bar there and open a restaurant there on a racecourse and sort of try and make them some kind of a hub. So I think there is going to be further an announcement on all of this. It might not even end up being a trial day at Goodwood. It might just end up being a day with a very small t in terms of trial, which starts off something which would be very exciting going on towards York and Doncaster and all those big meetings later on.
Yeah, I interviewed William Darby this week, and they are hoping to maybe have some semblance of a crowd at York Seaboard Festival. But the language he used, "we haven't given up hope," it didn't fill me with optimism.
No, but he's the definition of cautious, though, isn't he? William Darby. I'm not. That's not a criticism, but he's just he's a feet on the ground person. I'm sure in the back of his mind he's thinking he might might even be more successful than that.
Well, one thing you can guarantee: if York get this trial day, if Goodwood get this trial day, York will not be too far behind, and that would be tremendous to have a crowd on the Knavesmire as well. And we can really roll this into the next talking point, which is owners. And 2 owners with interest in 39 horses, Jonathan Harding's piece in the Racing Post today, Jed Shields and John Hughes, have written a blueprint for how an ownership strategy should move forward. I mean, Cornelius, for racecourses in the medium term or the short term, having a handful of people at the racecourse is not economically viable. No. But they've got to see the bigger picture. Yeah. And realise that without keeping investment in the sport, even if it's at their cost in the short term, the long-term effects are going to be disastrous.
Well, no one can disagree with what John Hughes and Jed Shields are saying. There are 2 options as far as they're concerned. The one is to just stick your head in the sand and hope everything comes good, which just isn't really an option, or to actually be proactive. I think it's a really good thing in any walk of life, rather than be reactive, being proactive. And so whatever you think of these 2 guys and what their analysis is, the fact is that they have stepped forward with an idea which, even if people in the highest levels of racing have been talking about these things, they haven't been doing it publicly. They've been doing it behind closed doors. So I think it's a really interesting document that they've come forward with, which is focusing the minds. It is because if owners fall away, and they are predicting that these are going to be desperate times for owners' numbers over the next few years, and it could take even a decade to recover from that. And then, of course, if there aren't owners, there are less horses. If there aren't less horses, there's less gambling and there's less funding and revenue.
Well, Charlie Parker, the president of the ROA, now boss of the Horsemen's Group as well, and a key figure in racing politics now, said on this programme 3 weeks ago,
this very chair,
1,800 horses who should be in training on the flat at the moment are at grass.
Well, I was talking to Eve Johnson-Horton this week, and I said, where are you seeing the particular areas here of perhaps people cutting back? And she used it as an example. If a horse goes wrong or a horse isn't looking very good, in the past people have said, let's keep going. And they're saying, well, actually, let's get rid.
Exactly, because the incentive's not there. Eve Johnson-Horton, again, who has
in this very
that chair very recently. And well done to Gay Johnson-Horton, Eve's mother, for breeding Mahatha yesterday as well. A fantastic triumph for them Bloodstock Empire. The Animal Health Trust is on the brink of collapse. Well, it is essentially collapsing, but there is now a rescue package being
I think
put forward to try and put it back
people
together
with
again.
quite deep pockets, the levy board's involved, the British Horse Racing Authority involved. The Animal Health Trust has been going, well, it doesn't matter how long it's been going, but it has been going since the 1940s. But the work that it does for racing, for the equine industry, for the wider industry as well, is absolutely crucial work. Now, they're struggling. They're looking at ways of cutting their cloth to ensure that they can keep going. I think rescue packages are being discussed, but I think this is probably really important because it would be catastrophic if, say, the equine flu outbreak of 2019, if that emerged and people didn't really, or another version of that emerged and people didn't really see it coming because the boffins there have not been able to do it. So this is really important work that is expensive, but it's so important that people, and I think, to be fair, people are saying, right, let's do something here. I think the levy board had already offered quite a lot of money anyway, which remains on the table. But no, there was a very interesting and detailed article in the Racing Post this week from Bill Barber. I always joke with Bill Barber, the industry editor of the Racing Post. He does all the boring stories, but this isn't boring. This is boring. This is not boring, and is really important. And Bill Barber's right on top of that.
And it's a really difficult job as well to kind of bring industry stories to life.
Oh, yeah. And when I say, but it's got in the press rooms. Every time I see Bill Barber working on the latest boring story, are you? And he always smiles and says, "No, I don't write about Leeds United." But the fact is, he writes some really important stories, and the side of things, they're not quite so sexy, some of them, but they are still important, and none more important, I don't think, at the moment than maybe the Animal Health Trust.
The Oaks and the Derby. We looked at this a little bit last week, and Lee wrote a piece about it in the Racing Post this week. Lee Motter said about the Oaks and the Derby being on the same day. Ground, of course, in the old days was always used as the reason why you couldn't have the Oaks and the Derby on the same day.
In analysis afterwards was a really interesting, I felt.
Yeah, and you can only really do that if the ground is basically the same and the rail configuration is the same. Because if you did it in a normal year, the rail configuration would be different.
Yeah, you can't do it on separate. It becomes just it's pointless on separate days. But if they're within an hour and a half of each other, I thought that whether you were a racing nut or you were just following racing through interest that day, it was genuinely interesting to watch the way the pacemakers went off in the Oaks and then Love, and the way Serpentine and Emmett McNamara did their bit in the Derby. But
then if you go back to a normal year and you have them on the same day, what happens to Friday at Epsom, really?
Well, I suppose you've got the Coronation Cup. I thought the Oaks, and this point was made in the Racing Post this week, I thought the Oaks being on the Friday, on the eve of the Derby, very often gets lost in the haze of excitement ahead of the Derby tomorrow, so to speak. But this year, the Oaks had a real prominence by being on the day. Now, I suppose the people at the Jockey Club will have to scratch their heads and work out, will it take away so much from the Friday that it will be to our disadvantage? I have a feeling that they want to be thinking out of the box a little bit, and it might to have the two of Britain's most historic sporting events, the Oaks famously 1 year older than the Derby, that having them on the same day actually would really add, certainly to the Oaks and perhaps to the whole day.
I would like to say different, but I suspect the economics of it are that it probably wouldn't make an awful lot of difference, and you would still get about the same gate on the Friday.
And Epsom, sorry, we've gone past our time, but Epsom is such a good experience. So those people who are coming perhaps corporately or whatever on the Friday, they're not going to say, "Where's the Oaks?" But then Saturday can be a real stellar day.
Right, Saturday is a stellar day. Now, yesterday would normally be what used to be called Super Saturday, where you'd have racing at Ascot, racing at Chester, racing at York, racing at Newmarket, all fighting over the terrestrial TV coverage and the crowd and the lion's share of the audience and profile and profile in the next day's paper. Didn't happen yesterday because we just had Newmarket and
then next weekend I think York and Chester are both on next weekend, are they?
Yeah. So
I thought maybe it's a racing bubble thing there. I'm never entirely convinced that this isn't a racing bubble issue, Super Saturday, and how, it's hard to get jockeys and this, that and the other. The one interesting thing always is that punters are so, who obviously are such an important part of the whole thing, are so sort of facing this massive wave of racing from all corners that they end up not really concentrating on as much as they should do. I thought yesterday worked really well for the July Cup. People will argue it wasn't the greatest quality July Cup of all time, but it was certainly going into it. There were plenty of strands to it, plenty of interest. The Royal Ascot form coming there, the Abernant Stakes form coming there, the failure from the St James's Palace Stakes coming there in threat as well. And I just felt the July Cup had a little bit more, maybe watching on terrestrial television, it wasn't bang, 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 bang so much. It was able to go a little bit more smoothly, and I thought it was a better experience.
But it's not one that really can be replicated in a normal year, can it? Otherwise, racing's financial model will have to completely change.
Well, it might have to, but things are going to change, aren't they? Things are going to alter, and clearly, if you make a change that's actually going to end up costing you money, you're not going to do that. But ultimately, maybe they'll just work it out. Maybe spreading things slightly thicker doesn't actually have that effect.
It's a nice idea for us, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's just a
but I do
question
think it's a racing, to an extent, it's a racing bubble. I don't think people are walking down my high street discussing too much racing on Super Saturday.
Sadly, I don't think people are walking down the high street discussing the July Cup, but you never know.
You never know. Well, I think Roger Teal will do plenty I bet in Oxted High Street they are.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah. I hope so.
There's a very good pram race in Oxted. That's true.
Is that right?
In the town of Oxted in Surrey.
Well, a pram race.
Yeah, there's a famous, not this year because for obvious reasons, but they have a pram race. And now the Oxted Pram Race is not the most famous Oxted in sport.
My aim in this programme is always to know something at the end of it that I didn't know at the beginning of it, and that has now...
Billy News and Time Charter, though, as well.
Billy News and Time Charter as well in the Oaks in 1982. Tactical was a winner for Her Majesty the Queen. Always increases the profile of the sport when Her Majesty has a high-profile winner, and she did so this week at the July Festival.
And Andrew Balding has been very enthusiastic about this horse since before its first race at Newmarket. Then it went to Royal Ascot and won the Windsor Castle. But throughout that time, the word has been just wait till this horse goes over 6 furlongs, over 3/4 of a mile rather than the 5. Yeah. Well, I thought at Newmarket that 6 furlongs, it looked as though the horse would be perfectly happy to go a little bit further than 6 furlongs, maybe on 7, maybe on towards the Classics next year. And if Her Majesty did have not just the most famous patron that horse racing has, but the most famous lady in the world was to have a horse going with a serious chance to the 2021 Classics, that would be fabulous. And note somebody... she hasn't. I think she's bred 3 Royal Ascot winning 2-year-olds, one of which was Crapello, who I think did win the 2,000 guineas in the 1950s. So there's form here.
Well, possibly.
But it would be. You don't have to be some mad royalist or some mad Republican to really appreciate this particular person who put so much effort and energy and emotion and et cetera, into racing to have something racing at the very top.
I think the point you make about the fact that she bred the horse, I think I discussed this on the programme a couple of weeks ago, is the Horse and Hound did that piece with Her Majesty. Or they got the indication as to which her top 5 horses were of all time, and an estimate came quite a long way down because the horses she bred were right up at the top, and it's the production and breeding of the horses that gives her the most pleasure.
The whole process,
so
absolutely.
If she were to breed Tactical to win a Group 1 race or an early Classic next season, I think that might just top the whole lot.
The pre-morning is the plan now, I think.
It's a good plan, and it looks like it's going to be a good race as well. Talking about the 1,000 Club, because a lot of people have reached the 1,000 milestone in the last couple of weeks. We interviewed John Quinn on this show last week, at Dave O'Mara, PJ McDonnell, David Probert has got to 1,000 winners as well. And it is a significant milestone for any trainer and a jockey, and one that we probably ought to make a bit more fuss of. Yeah,
and I think David Allen has got there recently. Mickey Hammond got there not long ago as a trainer as well to 1,000. Quite a lot of people, when interviewed on a landmark like that, they don't entirely know what to say. PJ McDonald was a notable exception to that.
Yeah.
So he rode his 1,000th winner, didn't he, at Newmarket last week, and he just took a breath and just took it in and revelled in what he had achieved from turning up from Ireland in the UK with, you know, hopes and dreams of so many other apprentices, to actually riding Group 1 winners and to getting to 1,000 successes. It's a really notable landmark. What my favourite 1,000 winner story was in the days when jockeys didn't necessarily put the colours on of which they just won on when they received their trophy, or they were preparing for the next race. Peter Niven, now training, rode his 1,000th winner one night at Wetherby. Oh, it was during Chester. It was in May of whichever year it was, and he was riding in my colours in the next race. So he receives his sort of special memento for 1,000 winners wearing the Lysaght silks.
Nice.
I thought whoever owned the horse that he did that 1,000 on must have been a bit miffed, but it was very nice for us anyway.
Now, jockeys are all very good like that now. So those were the members of the 1,000 Club this week. I thought David Probert deserved a bit of a nod.
Well, he's been, and David Allen as well. David Allen has plied his trade round as David, similar types of jockey really, plied their trade day in, day out, morning, noon and night, and it's tremendous reward.
And those were this week's Talking Points. Subscribe to Racing TV to be notified when more Luck on Sunday videos are appearing online. And don't forget to join me for the show every Sunday morning from 9 o'clock with the best guests.